All right, we're back. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 129. This week, it's almost Christmas, everybody, and it's still not Curse of Chucky or Cult of Chucky. So I hope that's not what you wanted for Christmas, because you're not fucking getting it. Because Tyler's doing something. He's never around no more. Uh, I like saying this in the hopes that he watches us and he's like, "Hey, why are you saying that?" Um, so still no Cult of Chucky. So instead, due to popular request, and by popular request I mean Papa Hades, longtime viewer, mentioned it once. I watched Krampus from 2015. So consider this the Christmas episode of the podcast. I don't know if I'll make another episode for Christmas Day like we've done in the past, but instead, I figured we'd just watch Krampus today, and then I could take a day off so I don't have to do anything. um, I think this is my first time ever watching this, like all the way through. I know I've seen like bits and pieces of it. Um, but yeah, it was really good. It's a solid little Christmas horror movie. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5. Big scores for Krampus. Um, yeah, it's really good. It's one of those things, and it's PG-13, which in previous episodes, PG-13 horror movies are always not even a 50-50 shot, because I got most PG-13 horror movies are like, all right, what are we doing here? Like, give me some fucking, give me some fucking, yeah, exactly, give me something, But it was all right. It's a nice one to watch, around Christmas. This is probably, I like to always give up. This is probably gonna be a Blu-ray movie. I'm probably gonna buy this. Um, so add that if anyone's keeping the keeping the tally. Add that one to the list. But yeah, there you go. So 7.5 for Krampus. Uh, yeah. So spoiler warning. I'm gonna ruin everything about it. So if you have not seen it, you've been warned. Um, the movie starts off with the opening credits is overlaid with it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Um and as it's playing, we see like a bunch of montages of like people fighting in stores for gifts and shit. And eventually it leads into like the main characters of the movie, Adam Scott, and his wife, her name's like Joan Collette or something. She's the mom from Hereditary. So this is her second time on the podcast. Um, Tony Collette, there you go. Yeah, so it's Tony Collette and Adam Scott and their son Max, who is like in a fight with some kid, but they were doing a play, so everyone's like watching, and their daughter is filming it all happen. We don't know it's the daughter then, but you learn it's the daughter. The daughter's like filming it, and she's laughing. And as soon as the daughter popped up, I was like, "What the fuck do I recognize her from?" And I had to go deep in the like, if you just Google a person and go through like what they've been in, I had to go deep to finally find it. But she plays Goldie's daughter in I'm Dying Up Here, if anyone's watched that show. So like season 2, when Goldie's daughter pops up, um, that's she's in this movie. Uh, but anyway, yeah, so that's the opening credits, and I couldn't help but think it's like one of those things where you ever meet those assholes who you mentioned Christmas, and they're like, well, Christmas is actually just a fucking marketing ploy for big businesses to sell their shit. And it's like, yeah, of fucking course it is. Shut the fuck up and enjoy the fucking, just buy some shit. Why the fuck are you complaining? Every time I hear that shit, I'm like, well, yeah, everyone has agreed upon this. Why do you gotta be the one asshole who's like, well, it's the big businesses? Yeah, that's the fucking world we live in. Shut up and buy a fucking cookie or a fucking Autobots toy or some shit. You know, I'm sick of hearing your shit, Pete. Fucking Pete, if you're listening right now, fuck you, Pete. Um, so after that, we finally get to the actual movie where Adam Scott and Toni Collette get home with Max. And we find out that the reason he was fighting that kid was because he was going around saying that, yeah, funny enough, he was going around saying that Santa wasn't real and Christmas was just a marketing ploy for, and so he was like, so I had to fuck him up. And he makes the excuse that he's doing it to protect the younger kids because he doesn't want their, like, impression of Santa to get ruined. But in reality, it's like this kid still believes in Santa. So also, I don't know. Hey, little kids, you might want to skip this episode. You don't want your dreams crushed. Because spoiler warning, guys, Santa, he's fucking real. He's coming. He's coming, and he watches you while you sleep, and he watches your mom while she's in the on the toilet or something. I don't know. So it's clear that this kid still believes in Santa, and that's why he was like fucking that kid up and shit. Everyone's busy. Adam Scott is like taking phone calls from his work. The sister just doesn't want to be there. She just is like too busy talking to her boyfriend on the phone. And Toni Collette is just worried. She's having to get everything together because her sister is coming for the holidays. And so her sister and their kids are all coming. And so she's having to get dinner ready and all the decorations and desserts and all that shit to get ready for them to come over. Apparently they've spent the holidays with them, I guess, the last couple years in a row. And each time it's like a disaster. The sister talks about how the last time they were there, someone shit in her bed, like human shit. And Toni Collette tries to say that it was like the dog shit, and she's like, no, it was a human turd in my bed, So everyone leaves Max in the kitchen with just his grandma. I spent half the movie wondering who the fuck's mom she was, because they never tell you. And she just always, and she speaks like she speaks a different language. I don't know what the language is. I'm just now realizing I forgot to like do my look up my facts and shit about this movie that I usually do before the podcast, because I am filming this on the day of the podcast. So I just scarfed down like 2 Tostinos, like little pizza pocket things, and now I'm doing this. So I'm probably gonna, at the end of the episode, real quick, like look up some shit. So maybe at the end of the episode, I'll have an update on what the fuck language she was speaking. But yeah, she speaks a different language, but everyone talks to her in English, and she understands everything. But then, sorry, I slapped my microphone. I didn't mean to do that, guys. And she talks back to them in whatever language she's speaking. And there's a point in the movie where in the first like 20 minutes, every time she talks, they give her subtitles. But then later on in the movie, they keep wanting these dramatic reveals about what she's saying. So they stop the subtitles. So then someone has to translate for the other family who's there, who they don't know what she's saying. It ends up later, halfway through the movie, Adam Scott calls her mom. So it's Adam Scott's mom. So that's his only, like, blood family there. Except for, his fucking kids and shit. But they leave Max alone in there with the grandma. And immediately they start talking about, like, Santa. And she's like, do you have your note ready? And he's like, yeah. And he pulls out this note that he's been writing for Santa. And she tells him that she believes in Santa and, she believes in the spirit of giving. And she starts to say, and the spirit of, like, sacrifice. But she, like, stops herself. And she, like, is like, oh, never mind. You want this fucking gingerbread man? And the kid's like, fuck yeah, I want this gingerbread man. So, Um, so everyone's getting ready for the family to show up, and eventually, I thought it was just gonna be like one of those like ridiculous big trucks that the people throw the lifts on and the giant wheels and shit. But we find out later it's a Hummer. But it pulls up and it's just like so loud that it's like shaking the walls and shit. Um, and eventually Tony Collette opens up the door for the family, and it's her sister. Her sister has two daughters, named like Jordan and Chris or something, and her husband is David Koechner, who, if you don't know who David Koechner is, I mean, come on. he's in, he's in Anchorman. He's, the fucking, all that shit. And so he's this lady's husband, and there's a whole thing with like, they say that the sisters, he wanted them to be boys. That's why they kind of have boys' names and they dress like boys. And all they care about, like the first line is like, "Oh, sorry, they're cranky. The Steelers lost." So all they care about is like football and shit. There's another weird kid who he never talks in the movie. He just stares at people with his mouth slightly open. And when he walks in, I did notice that in his backpack pocket, he has a can of sour cream and onion Pringles just sitting there and shit. And his whole thing is like David Koechner just keeps stuffing him full of food because he's saying that he's going to get him like, he's going to be the biggest lineman in the state by the time he reaches high school or some shit. And then they also have a new baby with them too. And they bring their dog Rosie, who was mentioned before with the shit incident. And finally, as a surprise, they've brought along the sister's aunt, who Tony Collette does not get along with. And instantly, when everyone leaves, she asks her sister, she's like, "Why the fuck would you bring her here? We don't get along and shit." And she's like, "Oh, she kind of sprung it on me too. I didn't do it by purpose, So immediately they go into like having dinner, and everyone, this is literally like, they haven't been on screen for 5 minutes before they're all having dinner, and everyone's just being super passive aggressive to each other. Like David Koechner is like trying to take shots at Adam Scott because Adam Scott was in the Eagle Scouts, and he's like, "Yeah, that's where people made baskets and they tied bows and shit like that." But Adam Scott says, "No, we learned about survival. That'll come back later." Fucking everyone's like making fun of Toni Collette's cooking because she cooks like this fancy shit, and so the aunt's like, "This is terrible," and Toni Collette's like, "Well, sorry, I wanted a break from mac and cheese and sliced up hot dogs and shit," and everyone's just like super passive aggressive bullshit. And the whole thing with this is they're trying to like get along with each other. And later on, Adam Scott has a scene with his son where he tells him, family's about trying to like people that you don't really have all that much in common with, and and all this shit. And maybe I'm just a really bad person, or I'm just really petty, but I do not give a fuck about any of that bullshit. And like, I will cut motherfuckers off so fast, and just like, as soon as a split second of that like petty bullshit comes out, the passive aggressive shit, I would just be like, "What the fuck are you talking?" Like, I don't know if it's just me or what, but I've never been this whole, "Well, you gotta be goody and don't say anything to upset anybody" and shit. And it's got me in trouble before. But I'm who the fuck are these? Why are we having to like not say what we're thinking when these assholes are like, So anyway. Eventually at the dinner table, the two girls steal Max's letter to Santa because they saw it in his pocket earlier. And so they start reading it at the table, and they're making fun of him for believing in Santa. But eventually the note gets super like personal, where he's asking Santa, like, he's like, "I wish my parents would love each other again." and I wish, my Uncle Howard and his family would, their money problems would stop and all this shit. And it's right as like Tony Collette's left the room, but everyone hears us and they're like, "Oh my god," And the girls are mad that he was saying that their dad had like money issues and shit. And Tony Collette comes in with like souffle or some type of dessert, and that's when all hell breaks loose and like Max jumps up and tries to get his note back, and they start fighting with the sisters, and he like bites one of their arms and shit. And eventually he gets the note, and he tells them all, he's like, "I just wanted Christmas to be how it used to be before we all hated each other, but never mind, I hate you guys, and I hate fucking Christmas. Fuck this stupid ass holiday. It's a marketing ploy for for big businesses." And they were like, "Shut the fuck up, Max, with that bullshit." So he leaves and goes to his room. And this is when, like I said, Adam Scott comes in and gives him the whole bullshit about getting along with family and stuff. And Adam Scott leaves, and as he leaves, Max starts to put the note back in the letter to Santa. But at the last minute, he's like, "Fuck this shit," and he tears it up and throws it out into the night sky, and it like zooms up into the fucking air. And then ultimately, this is what unleashes Krampus upon the family, because like everyone stopped believing and giving, and all the holiday cheer, some bullshit is gone. So this giant fucking like storm clouds roll in, and it ends up being this giant blizzard, and we see like the whole town, just the power going out everywhere. And so we go to the next day, where the power's out, and they're like, "Fuck, how are we gonna, we don't have enough food for this, and it's gonna be cold, and we don't have any hot water and shit." But Max doesn't care about any of this, because he's looking outside, and someone has built a snowman that is out in their front yard that is looking at the house. And he's like, "Hey guys, why is this snowman over here?" So they come over, and they're like, "I don't know, fucking Max, maybe someone built the fucking snowman, because that's what you do when it's snowing, man." And they slapped him on the head, and then they walked out of the room. I dropped my phone. So they get a knock on the door, and it's a delivery man, and he's like dropping off a present that David Koechner had ordered. And as David Koechner's like signing for it, he looks down, and there's a red sack that looks awful similar to Santa's sack of the presents, not the other one. And he's like, "Where'd this come from?" And the delivery guy's like, "I don't know, maybe the boys in brown." And he said that, and I was wondering if like legally they just couldn't say UPS. But I don't know. So anyway, David Koechner naturally is just like, "All right, well, let's bring it inside." So he just brings in this giant pouch of the fucking presents out of the cold. The Beth, the sister, Max's sister, asks Adam Scott. She's like, "Hey, her boyfriend lives like a couple houses down or some shit." So she's like, "Let me just go check on him and see if they have any power or some shit, And so Adam Scott's like, "Fine, you have 1 hour, be back in an hour." So the sister goes to check on her boyfriend. We go to her walking, and it's snowing like crazy, and then eventually it gets like super fucking dark. And she hears some sleigh bells, and she's like, "What the fuck is that?" And she looks over at the house next to her, and we get our first glimpse at Krampus on top of the house. And Krampus in this movie, if you haven't seen it, he's kind of like... I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. The fucking I don't even remember what race that was called, but from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, and it was like the bad guys where they were like, "Oh, you will come to the," and they were all hunchbacked and shit. He kind of looks like that, but he has like horns and this long, like wispy beard, and he wears this big black robe. And eventually, when we see his face, his mouth is always open, and he's got like these fucking big ass teeth and shit. And he has hooves for feet, and that's that's kind of how he looks. So she sees him for the first time on the roof, and she's like, "Fuck this, I'm going back home." So she starts running, but Krampus just like starts hopping from house to house, following her. And so she's like picking up speed, and eventually she sees like a light in the distance, and she gets to it, and it's the delivery van from the guy earlier who dropped off the present. She gets to the front door, or the driver's side door, and she's trying to get in, and she like moves some ice out of the way, and we see the delivery driver, like, I mean, he's dead, but I can't tell if he's just like frozen or what, but he's like, he has like a look of like, as he's dead. And so she's like, oh fuck, so she hides underneath the van. And she keeps still as she sees, like, Krampus walking around. This is the first time we get our look at, like, his hood, feet, and shit. And he's walking around the van. And I think he tries to lift it at one point, but he stops. And I think through shit we see later, he definitely could have lifted it. But I think he's just, like, fucking with her. And so eventually he fucking leaves. He pieces out. And she has a moment where she's like, oh, thank God. But then she starts hearing like a Pop Goes the Weasel box, and she looks over, and there's one sitting next to her, and it's spinning, and eventually the lid pops open, and nothing comes out until eventually, very slowly, this thing starts raising its head up out of the box, and we cut away, and we hear her screaming, and we see the van like shaking from side to side, and yeah, that's it. That's the last time you see Beth in the movie. She's fucking, that's for real. She's dead. So we go back to the house, and now some time has passed, and it's dark. And Max is the first one who says, hey, Beth isn't home yet. What the fuck's going on? And so Adam Scott's like, yeah, that's kind of fucked. So he goes over to David Koechner, and he's like, hey, this is when you learn it was a Hummer that he came in. He's like, can that Hummer of yours get through snow? And David Koechner's like, it could storm the beaches of Normandy if I wanted to, And so Adam Scott's like, cool story, dude. My daughter's fucking missing. And it's dark. Can we go and take the Hummer and go looking for her? And David Koechner's like, oh, a recon mission. I thought you'd never ask. So David Koechner and Adam Scott load up, and they are going out to look for Beth. Adam Scott's mom, the grandma, tries to talk to him and tell him that it's too dangerous and he needs to wait for the storm to end. But he's like, oh, fuck that, you old bitch. I'm going out to look for my daughter. And she's like, oh, why do you talk to me like this, Adam? And he's like, 'cause I can. And then he pushed her in the dirt, spit on her. So Adam Scott and David Koechner leave, and they're driving in the Hummer, and eventually they come across a snowplow that is like crooked in the middle of the street, and they're like, where the fuck is the driver, And as they're looking at it, they realize that the glass is broken, and it's broken to where someone broke it from the outside trying to get in. And they're like, well, I'm no scientist, but that's not good. And then they look over and they see a door with its, not a door. They see a house with its door caved open. And so they're like, all right, some shit is going on. So they go to the Hummer, and they had talked about it kind of at dinner when everyone was being an asshole to each other, where David Koechner's super into, like, well, maybe not super into guns, but he has guns because he believes in, shepherd has to protect his flock and all that shit. So he has like a shotgun ready to go, and he hands Adam Scott like a pistol, and he's like, let's go. So they go into this house. I don't know if it's the house that they saw right there with the door caved open, because it's the boyfriend's house. They're at the boyfriend's house when they're inside looking around. So maybe they were in the right spot there, but that seems awful convenient that the snowplow was stopped right in front of the boyfriend's house. But either way, when they're inside of the house it's the boyfriend's house, because they find the photo of, like, the boyfriend and Beth, like, at graduation, maybe? It looked like graduation. I don't know how old the Beth is supposed to be. There was a point in the movie where they go and take pictures with Santa, and when Toni Collette hangs up the picture, she sees that Santa is just, like, eyeing the daughter's ass. So, you know, they're the horny Santa back at it again. So they're going through the house, and eventually they see, like, giant cracks coming down to the chimney. Like, it's all busted in and shit. And David Koechner thinks that it was a gas line that exploded. But then they notice that out of the fireplace, it's a hoof print. And David Koechner's like, well, I know plenty of, you know, I've hunted plenty of game. That's like an elk or maybe a goat. But Adam Scott is like, why the fuck is a goat walking on its hind legs inside of, you know, of a whatever? But before they can investigate further, they hear Beth screaming. So they go running outside looking for her. Of course, though, this is all just a ploy to get them outside. So then this, like, demon thing, I guess it's a demon thing, under the snow, comes and grabs David Koechner. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, if anyone's watching. But I don't think you ever see what it is under the snow that keeps grabbing these people. It's just like a trimmer that you never see. And it grabs David Koechner. And David Koechner starts yelling about how something's biting him and shit, you know. And so Adam Scott, like, shoots a few rounds into the snow where he sees a bulge where the thing is. And that's enough. It lets go of David Koechner and it, like, slithers away. So Adam Scott helps up David Koechner. And they go running back to the Hummer. And by running, I mean kind of hobbling, because now David Koechner's leg's all fucked up. He'll be limping for the rest of the movie. But when they get back to the Hummer, it's, like, completely flattened and it's on fire and shit. So the Hummer is no longer, you know, a fucking thing in this movie. Back home, the people heard the gunshot when Adam Scott was shooting. So Toni Collette is about to go outside and look for them. But right before she goes out the door, they come busting in. And David Koechner is yelling about, like, get the fucking knives, board up the walls, you know, all this shit. But Adam Scott's able to calm him down enough to be like, hey, maybe not in front of the fucking kids, asshole. Maybe we'll, you know, let's calm down and then we can tell, you know, people other. So David Koechner is like, oh, I was, you know, I fell and fucked up my leg or some, you know, or some shit. And, like, the gun went off or whatever. So the adults are like, all right, get the fucking kids out of here. So everyone, like, the aunt and the grandma go to, like, take the kids in the kitchen and look after them. Before the grandma leaves, she tells Adam Scott to keep the fire hot. That's her parting words with him. She's like, keep the fire hot. And she walks out of the room. The Toni Collette wants to go look for Beth because now she's like, something's going on and Beth still isn't there. We need to go find her. But Adam Scott is like, listen, we need to board up the windows and everything and wait for a break in the storm, and then we can go look for her. And as this is happening, David Koechner has a line that I really like where he goes, he's talking to his wife, and he goes, I told you we should have gone to my brother's for Christmas. And the wife is like, oh yeah, Christmas on a pig farm. And David Koechner goes, Jesus was born in a barn. And I thought that line was good.
And as soon as the weather breaks, we'll go find her.
I told you we should have gone to my brother's.
Sure, Howard, Christmas on a pig farm.
Jesus was born in a barn.
Knock it off, you guys.
So, Yeah, so they're talking about, like, he was attacked under the snow, and, there's something busted into the boyfriend's house and all this shit. And as they're talking about this, they look over and they see that the kids have come and they're standing at the door. So now all the kids know that some shit is going on. So they're like, listen, everyone agrees. They're like, we can't do anything tonight. It's too stormy. Let's just wait until the storm breaks. So they nail up the windows, and we get one of these classic scenes where, everyone hated each other, but now, they have some Christmas music playing, and the power's out, and everyone's kind of being nice to each other, and David Koechner's like, hey, thanks for watching my back there. Maybe I misjudged you and all this shit. And then they're like, someone needs to take watch. And David Koechner's like, hey, go get some winks with your family. A shepherd's got to protect his flock. You go be with them. And Adam Scott's like, thanks, man. So Adam Scott leaves to go sleep with his family. And then David Koechner looks out the window. And then we immediately cut to it's darker. And David Koechner's just passed out, like snoring. He immediately fucking falls asleep. H2O time, guys. Oh, boy. That was pretty tasty. So everyone's asleep, and as they're asleep, we hear some rattling going on in the chimney, and eventually, very slowly, this chain comes down the chimney with like a hook on it and these sleigh bells on it. And tied up in the middle is a gingerbread man. And the chain keeps slowly, like, shaking back and forth as if to draw someone in. And, of course, the person it's trying to draw in is the weird fucking chunky kid that's just been eating the whole movie and doesn't talk. And he sees the gingerbread man on a chain, and he's like, ooh, gingerbread man. And he goes walking over to to the chain, and he takes the gingerbread man, and he takes a bite out of its head, and as he does that, the gingerbread man wakes up, and he's like, you bitch, and he grabs the chain and runs around the kid's body and ties him up, and they start to drag him up the chimney. This is when everyone wakes up, and they go running through the chimney. Toni Collette, like, grabs a hold of his ankles, and she's trying to pull him back down, but now Toni Collette is also being dragged up the chimney, so people start grabbing her. As they're fighting in the fireplace, Toni Collette accidentally kicks one of the logs that still has embers going, and it rolls into the Christmas tree, and so the Christmas tree immediately catches on fire. So Max has to run and get a fire extinguisher. They're still fighting to try to get the kid back, but Toni Collette looks up and she sees the gingerbread man alive, and this is what finally causes her to freak out and let go of the kid, and the kid is drug up through the chimney, and he's gone now. So they put out the fire, and they're like, what the fuck is going on? We got to get the fuck out of here, And this is finally when the grandma sits them all down, and finally she starts to talk in English. She's like, I need to tell you all this. And the whole movie, anytime some shit was happening, it was very clear that she knew, like, more than... It's always like an older person in the movie is, like, knows more shit than what they're letting on, and they've always, like, run into this in the past, because they're fucking old and smelly. And so she sits them down and tells them a story about how when she was a little girl... everyone in her village lost Christmas spirit and shit. And we see, it's all played out in a animated, flashback. And her village is, there's a blizzard, and I guess people are starving, so they have, people handing out bread and shit. And we see that the little girl grandma gets, a bread, and then, all the adults just, jump her and steal her bread. And they're like, fuck you, little girl. And then she goes home and she talks about how her family was the same way. and they lost the spirit of Christmas, and she has the Santa doll that she likes, and she tries to be like, look, mommy, my Santa doll, and they just take the doll and they rip it in her fucking face, and they're like, yeah, fuck your Santa doll, and they kick her in the shin, and she's all sad, and she grabs the Santa doll, and then she's like, you know what, fuck Santa, and she throws the doll into the fireplace. And once again, just like how Max tears up his note and throws it into the air, that unleashes Krampus. And so that night, Krampus comes and drags her parents to the underworld. And then the grandma was like, and then I just waited for him to kill me, but he never did. Instead, he like winks at her and he tosses her this like sleigh bell. And she says some shit about how he left her alive as a reminder of what happens when people lose hope and all that shit. And yeah, and so he leaves her alive, and so she's like, that's what's going on. And David Koechner's like, are we gonna listen to this old bat, you know? And he immediately is like, fuck all this, my kid just got taken, Beth is still out there. He's like, I'm going out there to find them. He starts heading towards the door. They try to stop him, and he just straight up points a shotgun at him. And he tells Adam Scott, he's like, listen, I'm starting to like you, I really am, but this is my choice, and you're not allowed to take my choice from me. And so they're like, all right. So he goes out front, but he doesn't even, like, get a step outside before he sees all these fucking snowmen built everywhere. And we see, like, demons hiding behind the snowmen, and they're, like, peeking out, and then they're running across to different snowmen. And so Toni Collette, like, grabs Adam Scott and David Koechner by the shoulders and drags them back inside and shuts the door. And she's like, listen, we are all staying here, and we are, you know, we're going to stay together. So later on, or no, so now, yeah, so that's the end of that day. We go to the next day. And David Koechner's wife is, like, digging through all the presents that are burned up, trying to find something that's still givable so she can give it to the kids to try to, like, you know, let them have somewhat of a Christmas. And she finds one present, and she hears, like, a ticking inside of it. And she's like, what the fuck is this? And she goes to open it, but before she can, Toni Collette comes up and gets her and brings her down to the living room where they're having a meeting where they're discussing a plan to go and get the snowplow, and they're going to drive it to the mall because the mall doubles as an emergency shelter. And if that doesn't work, then they'll go to the police or the police station. And if that doesn't work, then they'll just drive until they fucking get to some light or find some people or something. Just get away from here. The two sisters are walking around the house, and they start hearing Beth talking up in the attic. And they're like, Beth, what the fuck are you doing? We've been looking for you. And I don't remember what Beth says, but something like, oh, come up here, you know? So immediately, these two stupids, they go up into the attic to look for Beth. As soon as they're up in the attic, like, one of them screams, and David Koechner and all of them hear it down here. So Adam Scott, Toni Collette, and Toni Collette's sister all go up into the attic to look for the two girls. David Koechner, his leg's fucked up, so they don't want him going up the stairs, but he hears a noise in the kitchen, so he goes into the kitchen to investigate that noise. Adam Scott and Toni Collette and them are up in the attic, and they're looking around for the sisters, and eventually they come around a corner, and they see a giant Jack-in-the-Box that is, like, swallowing one of the sisters, and it looks really cool. Like, it's a really cool, like, it's clearly, like, they took time to build, like, this fucking, I don't think, besides, there is CGI, the gingerbread men are all CGI and shit, but that, it's tolerable. But, like, they did a really good job with a lot of practical effects on this movie. And so they're like, oh, fuck. So they go to attack the fucking, you know, the Jack-in-the-Box dude, but he goes slithering off. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, David Koechner walks in, and he starts getting shot in the leg by a nail gun, and he looks over to see a bunch of gingerbread men, and he's like, what the fuck, you know? So he, like, grabs a cutting board to block the nails from shooting him. We go back into the attic where all hell's breaking loose. A bunch of toys. There's like a demon angel that comes alive and flies at them and starts attacking Toni Collette, and it's got this weird, nasty little tongue that's popping out and trying to lick her. A teddy bear comes out of nowhere and starts biting Toni Collette's sister on the arm. There's a robot toy that starts fucking up Adam Scott and shit. David Koechner back in the kitchen, he's blocking all the nails, and eventually they have to reload. So when they're doing that, he drops the board, and next to them is like an oil lamp that they've been using for light, and he shoots it and catches them on fire. Eventually, they come running at him. Well, two of them. One of them dies by the fire. One of them comes running, and David Koechner is able to shoot it with a shotgun. But the other one, he misses, and he, like, gives up, and he's ready to die. And the thing jumps at him with, like, a sharpened candy cane to stab him. But before it can get to him, Rosie, the bulldog, jumps up and grabs it out of the air and fucking saves David Koechner's life and shit. Back in the attic, Toni Collette's sister is like getting attacked by the teddy bear when she looks over and she sees one of her girls laying there. And that gives her the mom strength to like grab an icicle that's formed on a rail and stab the teddy bear in the eye. She grabs an axe and hits the demon angel, and then she whacks the robot. And she has a clean shot at the Jack-in-the-Box that's trying to like slither into a vent, but she stops to do like a one-liner where she says like, "Hey, you asshole, get fudged," or something like that, and she fucking misses on the axe. So the Jack-in-the-Box is able to get inside the vent, and he's like slithering around. But they do manage to save the one girl up there. They managed, she's still alive, so it wasn't a total failure. So they come back into the living room, and everyone like regroups and shit. And that's when they hear the Jack-in-the-Box monster slithering around in the vents. And David Koechner's wife tells him that that's what's got like one of their daughters and shit. And so they're trying to figure out what to do, but Rosie, the dog, is like at a vent gate and she's like sniffing at it. So Max comes over and takes the vent off, and Rosie just jumps in there and she's like, "I'm coming for you, bitch." And everyone's like, "Go get her, Rosie." And so we hear this dog fight happening up in the vents where Rosie's like, "Arr, arr," and the Jack-in-the-Box is like, "Jack-in-the-Box, Jack-in-the-Box." I don't know what sound they make. And eventually you hear like the class is like, "Meow." Wait. That's not what it's like. You know, like a dog dying sound. And so they're like, "Oh man." But then the roof caves in and the Jack-in-the-Box falls down onto the ground. But before they can do anything, all the other toys are still alive. The teddy bear, the robot, they all come back and they jump on everyone and start fighting. But they leave the aunt open, and the aunt grabs the shotgun that's fallen on the ground and starts fucking blasting. She shoots the teddy bear in the face. She shoots the angel out of the sky. She shoots the robot, and she's about to blast the Jack-in-the-Box in the face. But then they hear like a fucking, I don't remember if it was just sleigh bells or what the sound was, but the Jack-in-the-Box is like, and he like claps his hands together, and a bunch of just random Christmas demon things jump in and start grabbing everybody. They corner Adam Scott and all of them, and they wrap a chain around the aunt, and they whip her out of the fucking living room, and they take her. And then they also kidnap the baby, David Koechner's baby. And that's what causes him to break free, and he tries to get it back, so he jumps onto the Jack-in-the-Box, but they just pull the Jack-in-the-Box out too. So in one swoop, the aunt, David Koechner, and the baby are all gone, and they're done with the movie. The demons are jumping around Adam Scott and them and like terrorizing them, but eventually they hear like this big ass howl. It's crazy. Like it's not a wolf, but it's this crazy sound. And that causes them to stop, and they leave Adam Scott and them, and they go running outside. So they're all packing up to leave. They're like, we got to get to that snowplow. And they hear a thud on the roof, and immediately they know that, like, oh shit, Krampus is here. So they're getting ready or they're all getting dressed to leave before Krampus comes down the chimney. And they all get in like a single file line to grab each other's hands, and they're like, let's go, everyone. So they go walking out the front door, but the grandma stays behind to sacrifice herself, and she locks the door, and she stays behind to confront Krampus after all these years. But I don't really know what her fucking plan was. Like, was it just to, like, buy time, I guess? That's the best thing I can think of. Because Krampus comes down the chimney, and this is the first time we get our good look at his face. And he kind of caresses her cheek with, like, one of his long, evil finger things. And then he, like, licks at her. He doesn't lick her, but his big ass tongue comes out, and he's like, and he flicks it at her. And then eventually he opens up his sack of presents, and we see a bunch of demon toys, and they just jump out at the grandma, and that's it. The grandma's dead. So I don't know what. I guess that was her plan, was just to buy time for them. But there was no like epic like, you killed my family or whatever, So Adam Scott and the wife and all of them are going, but of course they start getting attacked by the trimmer, the snow trimmer, and so Adam Scott starts shooting into the ground, and finally he like they're almost at the snowplow, and he's like, listen, I'll stay here to buy you guys time to get to the snowplow, and he like says goodbye to his wife and his son, and he stays there to like shoot at the fucking the snow trimmers. And I don't remember if you ever see him get grabbed, but that's it. Like, he's done. And then it gets almost comical, because in the span of a minute, they do literally 3 back-to-back emotional goodbye sacrifices. And one of them is fucking stupid, because they're going, and eventually the Toni Collette's sister gets grabbed, and she's getting pulled under, and she's like, leave me, go ahead. And she gets pulled away. The kids get into the snowplow, and Toni Collette is literally there, and she sees one of the snow things coming for them, and instead of just getting onto the fucking thing, she's like, you guys can make it, goodbye, and she gets grabbed and taken away. And so they had 3 emotional goodbye bullshits, and the stupid is, she's like, you guys will make it. She put them in a snowplow. These are fucking 2 12-year-olds. They don't know how to fucking drive. And I would care to wager that a snowplow probably doesn't just operate like a normal car. There's probably some other shit to it. So it was like you just left them to freeze to death in this fucking snowplow. Like, you did nothing, Toni Collette. So they go to start it, but of course the thing doesn't even like fucking start. It's dead. All the weird Christmassy demon things jump up, and they start grabbing them, and eventually they drag out like the girl. They drag her out of the snowplow. Max fights off one of his demons, and it drops on the ground, and one of the snow trimmers grabs it and goes away. So I guess the snow trimmer maybe just thought that was supposed to be Max, or maybe they just don't give a fuck and they'll just eat like everyone who's on their side. And so Max, I guess that means that the trimmer was full, so Max is able to get out of the snowplow, and as he does, he comes face to face with Krampus, finally, who gives him a present that's wrapped in the note that he tore up to Santa Claus, and the present is the same sleigh bell that he gave the grandma all those years ago. And as the kid looks up, Krampus is gone, and we get a voiceover of the grandma during the story talking about how he left me as the only one alive to be a thing. So that's it. Like, Max is the only one left alive, and he's leaving him as a reminder of what happened. And that really would. He would just leave him alive. But Max is fucking stupid, And so he goes and finds Krampus's camp with all his demon buddies, and they're having a rave. And he shows up and he's like, "Hey, asshole, I take it back. My wish, I take back everything. Just give me my family." And he throws the sleigh bell at Krampus, and it lands in the snow at Krampus's hooves, and it like seeps into the ground, and this opens up a fucking wormhole to hell, and the ground cracks, and there's just lava and shit everywhere. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we're about to throw this little girl into the fucking lava. How you like that, little kid?" And so they go to throw her into the lava, and finally, as a last-ditch effort, Max tries to use the power of Sad Kid, where he's just like, "Please, Mr. Krampus," and he's got like a little tear, and Krampus like wipes the tear away from his cheek, and you think it's gonna be like one of these like sappy Christmas, like the power of love, you know, but then Krampus just like starts laughing at him, and he's like, that was good, and they throw the girl into the fire, and he's like, "No, you know," and then Krampus grabs Max and hangs him out over the fire, and he's like, "Haha, get fucked, Max," and he throws Max into the fire, and we see Max falling into the lava, and then it pans out to Max in his bedroom, and he wakes up, and it's Christmas Day, and it's all snowy, you know, outside. And Max wanders out into the living room, and he sees everyone. David Koechner, Beth, you know, everyone that was taken. They're all alive. And at first, it's like a Wizard of Oz, like, "Oh, I had a dream. You were there, and you were there." And he goes and he sits in, and everyone's just having a nice Christmas morning. And it's playing like an acoustic version of, you know, "It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas." And they're all handing out presents, and eventually Max gets his present, and he opens it up, and it's the Krampus sleigh bell that he gives everyone, or that he gave Max, and everyone sees it, and instantly everyone's like face drops, and the grandma has a look on her face like, yeah, you know, and the movie ends with everyone just having these stunned expressions on their face. And it zooms out, and we see that they are trapped in a snow globe that is part of Krampus's like collection. And it just keeps zooming, and there's like just thousands of snow globes of all assumingly of like trapped families. Yeah, and that's how the movie ends. And I gotta tell you, I don't know the rules of the snow globe. I don't know if it's like Groundhog's Day and they're gonna wake up every day like, "Oh shit, Christmas Day," you know, and have that same thing. But there's a lot worse ways to live, you know, than just in a fucking like, you know, does the TV and everything still work? Like, I don't. Yeah, it doesn't seem like that bad. And the kid got his wish. Christmas is like how it used to be, except now they're in a snow globe and shit. But, yeah, there you go. That's the end of Krampus. This movie had a budget of $15 million. It made a box office of $61 million. So a good little payday for Krampus. This is the... Well, first off, I'll do best of, worst of. Let's do best of, worst of. My best of is gonna be maybe the reveal of the Jack in the Box demon. It was really cool looking. Yeah, so I think that might be my best of. Worst of is gonna be the fucking 3 back-to-back emotional goodbyes. It was just so fucking stupid near the end, with Toni Collette literally saying goodbye as they're at the snowplow and leaving 2 kids to drive a fucking snowplow. So there you go. That's my worst of. Now I'm gonna look up some facts real fast, and I'll cut this out so you won't hear me just sitting here listening. But if I find anything interesting, I'll tell you. Here's one. Apparently that whole thing that I was talking about, like his fucking face and shit, apparently that was just a Santa mask. I guess that's why it looks so unmoving and shit. So, never mind. Fuck what I was saying. It was a Santa mask. His teeth weren't just like that. With the grandma's language, apparently the family is Austrian. So I'm guessing she was speaking Austrian. Is that a language, or is it just isn't Germany? Is German and Austria? Aren't they the? I don't know fucking geography, but you know. So anyway, maybe that's what language she was speaking. Anyway, all right, that's about it. There you go. So that is Krampus. Like I said, very good little Christmas horror movie if you're in the mood for that sort of thing. Yeah. Next week, who fucking knows? It's after Christmas, so I'm hoping we can finally do Cult of Chucky, because that's why Tyler's not here, because, you know, his work is very heavily involved in Christmas, so he hasn't been around. So hopefully next week we can find time to get Cult done. Because literally, we're 2 movies away. I'm like, come on, man. We can fucking... we're almost there. So hopefully that gets done. But I hope you guys liked listening to me talk about Krampus. Hope you guys get everything you want for Christmas. Even though it is a marketing ploy for... yeah. So, anyway, go check out the gaming channel and everything. Tomorrow, if you're watching this on the day it comes out, tomorrow is a High on Life video. I played through that game, so you can go watch that. Or not. It doesn't matter. But, you know, be nice. So, yeah, anyway. Alright, thanks a lot. Have a good Christmas, everybody. And I'll see you guys next week. Alright.